Hello folks, thanks for checking out today's video. I'm going to do this one a little different. I'm not 100% sure if this project will be completable, but this is my attempt at a Nitro TRX-4M. We're going with the red Chevy here because I got some cool little red engines. We're going to be running a IRC branded Toki .05 right about there, and hole cut in the engine, sticking the head through it, and fuel tank, not sure yet. I get the feeling like I want to mount it forward. I might have to run an airplane fuel tank, but this one will fit back here between the frame rails, so that's a consideration. Anyways, the really interesting part is the way I'm going to have to do this transmission. I wanted to keep the low gear ratio because I wanted it to be able to crawl. So what I'm going to do here is split this transmission open. The transmission's got 3 gears, right? You got your input where the pinion gear of the motor would have gone, and then an idler, and then the out drive. So it goes input, then idler, then out. But the input drive, I can just use a longer 3mm shaft, this is a shock shaft, and just extend that shaft out of the transmission case, because I can't get a pinion gear small enough to fit into that little hole where the original Traxxas pinion gear went. You know, that's microscopic. So I'm going to extend the shaft of the input gear clean through the back of the transmission housing. So I'm going to drill a 3mm hole right there and have the shaft come out, and then, you know, mount a large pinion gear onto that extended shaft, and voila, I maintain most of the reduction of the original transmission. So I'm going to give that a try, and then I'll figure out engine mounting, and we'll see if I can get it to mesh. Alright, so hole drilled through there. This is that 3mm shock shaft, cut the threaded end off of one of them. So obviously that lets the gear inside free spin on it, but you can see some movement on the transmission out drive. It's spinning, I promise. So obviously I've got to attach this to that input gear, right? So I'm thinking polish part of the shaft down flat and then load up that input gear with some glue, and the glue will solidify and make it a keyed gear basically, and slide onto the shaft, and bada bing bada boom. So next I've got to figure out the spacing on this, which is hitting the rear forelink attachment there. See that? So my spur gear can only sit, that close to the transmission, which dictates where exactly my engine can go. So I've mocked up a flywheel and a clutch bell just real quick so I get a general idea. This is easier to do with 2 hands, and looks like it'll have to sit right about there. Now the rear shock mounts are hitting my pole start, so we're going to move those shock mounts, and I think it'll be easier to move them back than forward, and we'll see if that solves it. Alright, so I was boxing myself into a corner with gear sizes here because I was like, oh, the transmission's got to go right there. Well, no, I can raise the transmission up, right? So I'm going to raise that transmission up with longer screws. This right here is a 20 tooth, but I think I'll probably run like a 24 or a 25 tooth. That's a Mod 8 pinion gear that I'll just, reuse as a spur, and then I'll have to run it in so that this whole thing spins a little smoother, but it'll line up, right? So I've moved the rear shock mount, get this pesky thing out of the way. I've moved the rear shock mount basically all the way forward, and I've rotated it so that the shocks go even further forward. Not sure if I had to do that, but anyways, the shocks are going to be at a slight forward angle, but that'll just let the large pull start kind of slot in right behind it, and let the pinion on the clutch bell get close enough to the transmission. So let me figure out full size on the spur gear and see if I can get that gear actually attached on the inside. Okay, if for some ungodly reason you're following along at home, you see that hole in the top of this cover here? That lines up with the long pole, just to give you an internal view of the transmission here. And this guy, like I said, that's a shock shaft from VRX is the brand. It's just a 3mm and long. So I've taken the transmission apart, and I've got this gear with some flat spots polished off. So I'm just going to glue that guy on there, and hopefully it will actually spin the shaft instead of spinning on the shaft. Alright, so this is where I'm at, day one. Got the transmission on here, and you'll notice I've got the transmission at an angle there. So I've already cut into the pull start to try to get the engine to sit lower on the frame rail, because the pull start width is exactly the width of the frame rail. So where it angles up for the rope exit, I needed to cut some to get it a little lower, but it still wasn't low enough to make contact with the spur gear, which is actually, what is it, 23 tooth pinion gear. So you know, it's close, but it wasn't meshing. So I actually added 2 little slivers of plastic under here to make the whole transmission sit at an angle. And who cares, right? 5 degrees upwards will let me mount this a bit higher, and at 5 degrees downwards, and you know, what's another 5 degrees for the rear drive shaft connecting there? I think it'll be okay. Anyways, with the engine in it, it's going to ride pretty low the entire time. Fuel tank wise, I really like this little HSP fuel tank, because with a little bit of trimming I could slot it in right here, and again, it is the width of the frame rail, so I could drop that in there, but I don't know if it'll clear the body. So prepared for a worst case scenario of the classic 1-ounce Sullivan fuel tank. If you've seen my videos on the Mini T and Mini B, this is the fuel tank I use for that. I could just lay it down sideways, and the body would clear that. It's obviously not nearly as wide as the body, so that is my last hope. But I will be able to mount this, and the engine will be able to stick through. It spins the right direction. You know, brakes I'll figure out eventually, somewhere, somehow. But it's coming along. I'm going to try to bias basically all the weight I can up here on the front. So fuel tank, probably do something like the battery under the bumper, or stacked on top of the fuel tank maybe. I need to counter out this extreme rear weight, but you know, it's possible. The gear will mesh, and that's really the stumbling block that keeps me from beginning a lot of projects, is I can't figure out how I'd get the gear to mesh. So this one will. I know for a fact I'm going to swap over to one of these carburetors that is the swing style, so that the servo can be up front, because the current one on here is a slide carb, so I want it to swing forward and backward, and I can mount the servo up here, again getting all the weight up front. But that's where I'm at. I know it wasn't a whole lot of progress today, but it verified that it's possible, which is great, because you know, I've got to pay for the truck. So thanks for watching. Subscribe to stay tuned for this and other really dumb builds, and we'll see you later. Oh, and you know, when I'm finished, this will be available for sale, so follow along. We'll see you later.